So we are multifaceted human beings, and we are not just our physiology, we are not just our psychology, but we are emotional and spiritual beings as well. And we can look at these four parts of us in terms of the brain. And if some of those parts of us are sleeping, then we could definitely become depressed, anxious, afraid, and stressed. And if we think to ourselves, why would a brain sleep? The obvious answer would be because it's tired. If you are stressed, exhausted, burnt out, and you are using your conscious awakening time to keep getting tasks done, never taking a break, never taking time for restoration, your brain can grow tired just like anything else. And if it's tired for long enough, it can fall asleep. And our brains have a front and a back, and we can see these on neural imaging. We can see brains that are literally asleep in the front, and might be very, very active in other parts. For example, if we are stressed and in a survival mode, our limbic brains will be very, very active, while other parts, our creative sides, our empathy, our warmth, our ingenuity, our inspiration, all those parts of the brain can be asleep neurologically and scientifically speaking. So we also have an upstairs and a downstairs of the brain, and we can operate from either one of those perspectives at any given moment in time. And operating from a front or prefrontal cortex and operating from the top of the brain is very, very different from somebody who is operating from the base of the brain and the hindbrain. So we could literally look at a brain as being downstairs, and this would be our limbic system, our stress survival responses. And then we could look at the upstairs of the brain, which is where our creativity and ingenuity come. And that part of the brain, we find, is often asleep. So we are operating from a lizard brain perspective, which is our million-year-old brain. And that's very much focused on survival, food, sex, sleep, the very, very basics of life. And I would say if we became depressed, then we would need to look at scientifically at how we are using our brain. And that brings us to another thing. When I say to you, how are you using your brain? It means that there should be an operator. There should be a witness to what is going on inside you. There should be a manager managing which parts of the brain you are accessing on a daily basis. So consciously, without a doubt, the research shows that we can, through practice, through meditation, through mindfulness and contemplation, we can use tools to access different parts of our brain that may be asleep. We can even use things like hypnosis and so on to do the very same thing in a matter of minutes. So there's no doubt that the research points to mindfulness and any kind of meditative practice to really waking up our consciousness enough so that we can create something new for ourselves. There's very little that you're going to create in the downstairs of your brain. I always say never show a hungry person the view. They're not going to be able to see aesthetic beauty when they are thinking about where their next meal is going to come from, where their next paycheck is going to come from. And the part of the brain that is associated with survival will be very, very active. So people are often talking about transformation and awakening. And I think we just need to look at that. We don't listen to the word, you need an awakening experience, literally, to transform your life and get out of a depressed state. If you are stressed, you become sleepy, your brain becomes sleepy or depressed and stressed. And it is a state that some people stay in for decades, for a lifetime. But the answer is that you can awaken from those states. And people often say to me, how can you treat our depression? I don't want to treat your depression at all. In fact, we don't want to treat depression any longer. It's 2021. And what you rather need to do than continue trying to treat depression, if it hasn't worked for you in the last 2-3 decades, then stop treating it and move on to something else. That is transformation. That is an awakening experience, is stopping what you are doing. We need to stop doing what doesn't work, and that is the first aspect of any kind of transformative process or awakening process, is not being able to go, but being able to stop. And that is where we start with any treatment, is stopping the neural pathways that are in the downstairs or the hindbrain, for example, and accessing new ones. So it's literally like walking down a different street or a new chapter in a book. It's not necessary to keep writing the same chapter over and over again. It'll make you tired, it'll make you angry, and it'll make you hopeless. So rather than do that, when we look at transformation, awakening, a shift in consciousness, a paradigm shift, we are looking really at stopping the perceptions, the feelings, the thoughts, and the emotions that no longer work for us, that are based in learned memory, and looking for new ones. And this has happened for people overnight. We've got the incredible awakening stories from Eckhart Tolle, from Deepak Chopra, from who had a dark night of the soul experience himself, until he dealt with the question of who am I, and managed to get through that as he is a conscious being, not only physically or psychologically or emotionally, but he is consciousness itself. And that moved him through to the next level of his life, where he literally has been one of the people that changed the world, much like Eckhart Tolle is doing right now, much like Neil Donald Walsh has done, and so many other teachers that we have who have gone through awakening experiences. Dr. Joe Dispenza is another one. So the stories are really endless about how we can wake up consciously and wake up the brain to something new and profound that can change our lives. So scientifically, it's easy to see through imaging that our brains are asleep. We can see it on an image in a matter of moments. But we are not only our brains. There is a lot more consciousness out there than that is happening in the mind. So it's not only your brain that needs to wake up. It is also your emotions, your empathy, your, functioning from the heart is something that is based in self-love. And if you develop self-love, you will like meets like, and you will eventually see and experience the love that you feel on the inside in things that you see, hear, and experience on the outside. So yes, love is contagious, and you are either filled with fear or with love, and one is based in the downstairs of the brain and the other at the very, very top. So if we look at consciousness, we must look beyond the brain, and we can do that when we see people and examine them when they sleep. And science today is obviously saying that we are not conscious, or at least minimally conscious when we sleep. However, when we dream, our consciousness is experienced in a very, very high state. And we can find that in meditation, it happens in much the same way. We can find that in contemplative practices, when we are still and when we focus on silence or a centering word or do any practice like that, we can actually get more consciousness rippling through our physiology, psychology, our emotions, and of course what is spiritual today, which is you being a witness of the self And when you awaken to the fact that you are more than just the mundane, when you are more than just what is happening in your depressive state, you might not be able to see it if you've experienced that depressive state for many, many years. And you might need to see a psychologist or a life coach or a counselor to help you see things in a different light. Because when we change the way we look at things through consciousness, the things we look at really, really do change. And that is a miracle in itself. And so, speaking of consciousness and miracles, we either experience nothing as a miracle or everything as a miracle. And, we will see that oxygen is highly explosive, and hydrogen is highly explosive in itself. And when we bring the two together, it gives us life and we can breathe. And breath, meaning spirit, is really, really the higher consciousness that we find. So everything seems to be a miracle or nothing is. And so A Course in Miracles will teach us that nothing real can be threatened and nothing unreal exists. And here lies the peace of God. So that consciousness and that peace that they speak of is the opposite of where depression leads you. Depression and anxiety are neurological as well as spiritual experiences that can be referred to as a dark night of the soul. So if nothing real can be threatened, you need to go and look for an awakening in that space, in your brain, your emotions, and your soul, or consciousness as it's called today. So many different words for it. And find the like in the consciousness out there in the world that others are experiencing that does resemble the peace of God.